Hi, my name is Nick Tan. I'm a first-year cardiology fellow at Mayo Clinic, and I have here with me Dr. Jafna Cox, professor at Dalhousie University and endowed chair in cardiovascular outcomes for the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And he's going to talk today about the IMPACT AF trial as well as its clinical implications. Dr. Cox?
Thank you, Dr. Tan. This is a pleasure and an honor. So let me just give you a little bit of context behind the IMPACT AF study that hopefully your viewers will be interested in. These are very sobering. So did you know that human knowledge is currently doubling every 11 hours? In terms of medical knowledge, it is now doubling every 72 days. And so what that means is that a medical student who is going to graduate in 2020 is going to have seen a fourfold doubling in medical knowledge. Back in 1995, there were about 10 to 15 clinical trials being reported every day. As of 2015, there were 95 of them. Complicating things even more, that's going to be difficult enough for us specialists to try to keep in track of. And as you know, we're here at the AHA. There's all sorts of new discoveries that are being reported on, new technologies that we're hearing about. It's challenging enough for us who only have to deal with one particular organ to try to assimilate all of this information and apply it appropriately. Imagine if you were a generalist or even a primary care physician. Here's some other sobering statistics. The average primary care physician has to be aware of 10,000 diseases or syndromes, has to know how to use up to 3,000 different medications, has to be aware of 1,100 laboratory tests. So this is impossible for human beings to be able to assimilate. And what it means is, it means that there's, on top of everything else, a delay in terms of bringing these new therapies to our patients. There is inconsistency in terms of how people, even within the same clinic, will be managing a given patient. And so the premise for the IMPACT AF study was to see if we could develop a computerized decision support system that would sit in the background, was able to pull information out of electronic medical records, was able to take information provided by the primary care physician when they were seeing the patient with regards to things like their hemodynamics and changes in their profiles, patient acquiring diabetes or hypertension and so forth, be able to take information from labs, such as in the case of atrial fibrillation, which was the focus here, INR measurements, creatinine clearances and so forth, and to have all of this digested, have all of this examined, and on the basis of our national Canadian guidelines, provide feedback, or rather recommendations to the primary care physicians with regards to how they could manage their patients. What we did was a randomized controlled trial. This was unblinded because there was no computer decision support system, sham, that we could get a primary care physician to use. It was randomized, with the unit of randomization being primary care physicians and or the practices in which they worked. It was pragmatic, so we didn't have some sort of a protocol that physicians had to follow. This was there to enable them, and if they wanted to follow the suggestions, they could, and if they didn't want to, there was nothing that we could do to prevent them from doing that. And it was an intention to treat, and it was a cluster design trial, so that what that allowed us is, over the course of the study, if there were any changes being made to the guidelines, we could adopt those changes by updating the software. The unit of randomization were the patients that the randomized physicians were entering into the study. We kept the enrollment criteria very, very open. And what we managed to do was we managed to enroll 25% of all general practitioners in our province and 12% of all the atrial fibrillation patients in the province. Everybody was followed out for a year. We had also purposeful additional randomization according to urban-rural split, so that we could try to establish whether a support tool like this could be more beneficial to somebody in the outlying areas. When we did the intention to treat analysis, which typically, as you know, looks at time to first event, there actually was no difference in terms of the number of patients who had events in each arm. However, when we then took a look at the number of events that the patients had, there was clearly a difference And the primary efficacy endpoint was the combination of a cardiovascular hospitalization or atrial fibrillation-related emergency department visits. And what we saw was that there was about a 30% reduction in the rate of atrial fibrillation-related emergency department visits in the patients whose primary care physicians were managed according to the CDSS. We also took a look as our primary safety endpoint being ISTH criteria for major bleeding, no difference between the two groups. And an interesting little finding that I hope will be reassuring to those of us who use antithrombotic therapy is in the real world, in our patients, we only saw rates of about 1.5%. So anybody who has concerns about especially the non-VKL anticoagulants causing bleeds don't appear to have to worry about it so much because the rates are very, very low. Why was our study not positive? Well, probably a few reasons. First of all, as I mentioned, it was a pragmatic study. We will have information down the road because we were able electronically to log in how many times the physicians were using the tool and how often they were using it. So we will look at that, but again, as I said, this is a pragmatic trial. People may have used it, they may have not used it. I think a big issue was that we probably didn't have sufficient power in terms of the number of patients or the duration of follow-up. And however, I think that these sorts of tools, we're seeing more and more of them being developed and being put into place. Personally, I think, however, that we need to begin to evaluate them to the same extent that we evaluate drugs or devices that we use in cardiology and in medicine in general. And the reasons why is because these sorts of tools can have an impact on patient outcomes that we need to understand and appreciate. They can also have impacts on health services utilization and therefore system costs. And so I think if somebody develops one of these programs and they really, really believe in them, I think it behooves them to do something like a clinical trial to prove their value.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for giving us something more to think about. For more videos like this, please visit our website, youtube.com/fitsonthego. Thank you.